Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Contrarians. How's everyone doing tonight?
Awesome.
All right.
Great, Marco, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking me. It's good to see everybody here again. We're doing another Dark Horse Albums edition, where what we do is we pick an album. Our patrons actually vote on this. They come up with suggestions and we vote on what Dark Horse albums we want to talk about. They're typically albums that aren't seen as the best album from a band. So they might be a little middle of the ranking, maybe bottom of the ranking. And we kind of go around with the panel of folks who want to discuss it. And we talk about, are we yay or nay on this album? What do we rate it out of 10? We give a general consensus from the Contrarians panel. And we have a lot of fun doing this as we go along. So today we're actually going to be talking about acdc, Flick of the Switch. The album came out, if Wikipedia is telling me the truth, 1983. There's 10 tracks on it. We did a poll on Patreon. So we asked our Patreon members what they thought of the album. We had 14 say yes for the yay on the album and 2 said nay on the album. And here's a couple of comments from Patreon. Colston says, I'm yay, 8 out of 10. The first acdc record I was aware of being released. I got the Cardboard Switch promotional thing from my local record shop. After they were done with it, I was their best heavy metal customer. As for the album itself, it is heavy, raw, and exciting. Love both side openers, Rising Power and Guns for Hire. How to kick off a side of vinyl in both cases. Guns for Hire was the tour opener, but never played again. Disappointingly, they only played one date in the UK, Monsters of Rock Donington, August 1984, and I was in Florida and distraught. I did get to see a show on UK TV, BBC Two, late night in concert from the Detroit show in 1983. John says, I remember digging it back in the day, but honestly, I haven't listened to it in 35 years or more. John the Music Nut says, in my opinion, Flick of the Switch is acdc's last great album. The raw production works perfectly here, and the band sound invigorated. The House is on Fire, Badlands, Guns for Hire, Bedlam in Belgium, and the title track are all among the best of the Brian Johnson era. No hit singles, but that doesn't matter. It's still awesome. 9.5 out of 10. And Melissa shares, I'm with John. I dug it when it came out, saw the tour, but I have not revisited it in a very long time. So that's our Patreon consensus. What we're going to do is we're just going to jump right into it. I'm going to go around to each of the people on our panel, tell us our yay or nay, give us a little review of the album, what you rank it out of 10. I'll be adding up the scores and we'll give an average at the end. And in your share, if you have anything to plug, then plug away. I'm going to throw it over to Reed. Why don't you start us off, Reed? Tell us what you thought about the album and rank it out of 10. And if you have anything to plug, let us know.
Okay, thanks, Marco. And guys, let me know if I am not talking loud enough. I'm, among many other issues, I'm asthmatic. West Texas is on fire, and the air is full of ash and stuff, and it's a little hard for me to breathe. So, I'm here tonight to represent the people that think every acdc song sounds the same. Now, before everybody gets mad at me, let me throw out 2 perspectives on this album. I have a historical perspective and I have a current perspective. So I remember when this album came out in 1983. I was 15 years old. These were the music glory years, right? I really started getting into heavy music in 1980. And much more when MTV hit in 1982. And I was really into heavy metal. And at this time, any band that wasn't straight up pop was more or less marketed as heavy metal. And let me say, I think acdc is a terrible example of a heavy metal band. They're a great blues rock band. I'm not saying acdc is a bad band. I'm saying I have never considered them heavy metal. And you compare them to everything else that came out in 1983. We're talking about Holy Diver, Iron Maiden's Peace of Mind, even Quiet Riot's Metal Health came out in 1983. Alcatraz, No Parole from Rock and Roll came out in 1983. And after listening to Vivian Campbell and Yngwie Malmsteen, Angus Young is not very impressive as a guitar player, right? So if you're into that super high energy, high velocity kind of soloing in heavy metal, acdc just comes up wanting. So in the MTV years, when this album came out, I remember hearing Flick of the Switch in particular, and I was just like, yeah, it's okay. But it didn't really do it for me. But it's 40 years down the road, right? And I've been listening to a lot more music and getting a lot more into blues rock and things that are not strictly heavy metal. And I've got a headspace where not every band that has electric guitars has to be heavy metal. There's just like every, not every band in the late 80s is hair metal. I don't know why everything gets thrown into that category. But now I can listen to this album, I think, and appreciate it for what it is. And that's pretty good. It is now my favorite of the Brian Johnson era albums. It's consistently high energy. It's got a great throughput. It's got drive to it. But I'm still a casual acdc fan, and I understand the perspective of people who think that every acdc song sounds the same. And I'm not a drummer, but I suspect that every song on this album is within about 10 beats per minute of every other song. They're in similar keys. Brian Johnson sings them with the same vocal tone. It has the same guitar tone. Angus is not a versatile lead player. He does blues solos on every song. Now, you can say, yes, they have different melodies. They have different lyrics. They have different riffs. But you can also just listen to this album from start to finish, and I couldn't tell you how many songs are on it. If you played a song off of Flick of the Switch, and then a song off of Back in Black, and a song off of For Those About to Rock, We Salute You, I couldn't point to the song and say, oh, that song goes with this album, because the albums are very consistent. I'm willing to believe there's a production difference between this and like For Those About to Rock, We Salute You. That album bored the hell out of me when it came out, and I haven't listened to it since. So I believe that happened, but if you're a casual fan, you're not going to encounter those things. But I will say, if you're in the mood for good, aggressive blues rock, then Flick of the Switch is a great album. Just don't expect a versatile album, an album with light and shade and some of the things that, I grew to love about the better Black Sabbath albums. That's a completely different world. But even then, like another one of Martin's favorite bands, ZZ Top, which is in the category of people always say, oh, these ZZ Top, all the songs sound the same. Well, if you take like DeGueo and Afterburner and Antenna, those albums don't sound anything like each other. So there's still a lot of variety to me in ZZ Top that I don't get out of AC/DC. So for AC/DC, I like this album, but I don't think it's one of those albums that's like so good that if you're not already an AC/DC fan, it's going to convert you to an AC/DC fan. I like it. I like hearing the occasional song off of it, but I don't love it. I'm going to give it a 7.
Okay. Thank you for going first. Hope you feel better.
Thank you.
All right. So we got a 7 on the board. I'm going to throw it over to Nick next. Let us know what you think about the band and rate it out of 10.
Okay, Marco, thanks. I like this album. I'll get my grade out of the way because I've been waffling back and forth. I'll push it a little higher and give it an 8, but it's a fond 8. And if one were to think, well, at least in my mind, Back in Black and Highway to Hell is a 9 or a 10, then I would put this around an 8. In prepping for today, I lost track of a few AC/DC albums, went back to For Those About to Rock. And unlike Reed, I really liked it. I forgot that's really a forgotten one for me. And I would actually bring that one up there around this one or maybe even a tad higher. But I like this album. If you like to hear a guitar plugged in to an amp with no effects, pure rock and roll, this is a great album to listen to. In a sense, like Reed just said, it's a blues rock album. I mean, I harken back, maybe Martin doesn't want to hear this, but that pure guitar sound, that takes me back to some of those 70s bands at all, like Free, et cetera, et cetera. But I really like it. How did I first hear this album? I guess it was the summer of '83. And, AC/DC was already getting crowded out by the metal bands that are out there. And I heard this where the local rock radio station played it from end to end, and I recorded it that night. So that's how I came to acquire it. But I'm telling you, after that listen on the local rock radio station, you didn't hear one track ever again from this album. And I don't know why, other than for me, in my little corner of the world, here it was 1983, and you still had Back in Black, which was, an all-time album that was played a lot. You had Dirty Deeds, which I read recently was cravenly released after Back in Black, and that actually was quite a popular album growing up as a kid. Then you've got For Those About to Rock, and so you have these 3 AC/DC albums all within a span of less than 3 years. And I could see that, besides changing tastes and changing times, that maybe there was maybe a bit of overload on AC/DC. But, again, looking back on this in hindsight, if they had maybe released this another 6 months later, it might have been more successful. But I really like the sound of it. I think one criticism, echoing what Reed said, maybe this album could have benefited from some other input, whether another producer. But, when you get to about the 8th or 9th track on the album, some of the vocal melodies and the choruses sound to be a bit the same. And if I was a singer, I'd be able to analyze those better and say, yeah, they are kind of homogenous and sound alike. But some of the standout tracks for me, Nervous Shakedown is one of my favorite AC/DC songs. I just think that song has got groove. It rocks. Why it was never played more and got more airplay on radio, befuddling to me. I also like Badlands. That's sort of the example of blues done right. And contrary to what you may think, it is actually not slide guitar you hear on that, but it's sort of got that In My Time of Dying Zeppelin-y riff that you sometimes hear in blues songs. But it's a real, not just ride on A, ride on E, Roadhouse Blues type number. It's got something there. So I like that track a lot. So again, I like this album. The other album that came out within a month or two of this one with the white background or white cover was Lick It Up. And then maybe in my brain, it came out about a month or two later. Maybe we sort of forgot about it with these white covers. But and I know they aimed to have a simple type cover, but it was one of those things where it just died on the vine as far as radio airplay is concerned, and you didn't hear local bands playing it, didn't hear anything else. But it's not a criticism of the album. I think it's just it's a good album that just sort of been overlooked. And if you haven't heard it, go back and listen to it.
Nice.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. I'll throw it over to Martin. All right,
okay. So I'll give you a little more background on this album as well. So at this point, they went back to Compass Point Studios where they, to relive the glory of Back in Black. But there were a lot of problems. Phil Rudd was a lot of heavy drugs and drinking. They actually fired Phil Rudd halfway through the sessions, although he finished his job. But yeah, at this point, they were fed up with management. David Krebs has told me the story about AC/DC coming back and almost, from his point of view, they were shaking him down to really lower their commission rate. And Lebel Krebs wouldn't budge on it. And there were some other political issues going on. So Peter Mensch is out the door. So Peter, who worked for Lebel Krebs, so management is changing at this point. They're already really upset at Mutt Lange. They thought it was excruciating. It was like pulling teeth doing For Those About to Rock. So they wanted to get back to that whole raw feel. And there's the famous quote from Malcolm Young who says that, he listened to Johnny Winter's Mannish Boy, and there's the, guys in the background clapping and hooting and hollering, and they wanted to get that live feel back and get rid of a lot of the effects, which they did. It's self-produced, but Tony Platt is in there. So yeah, as Tim mentioned, this took a long time to go just single platinum. At this point, we've got Back in Black at double diamond. We've got For Those About to Rock at 7 times platinum. And, I maintain at this point, they're still on the Back in Black tour. I mean, basically, they're out there promoting the one record that's selling more than any other record. It's not For Those About to Rock. It's not Flick of the Switch. They're still touring Back in Black at this point. But okay, so I love this album. It is my favorite of the Brian Johnson era. To me, I remember feeling like AC/DC was back and they were cool again because Back in Black, we all loved it, but For Those About to Rock was very puffy and warm and corporate sounding, and it really seemed like it was just a mellower version of Back in Black, like a weak tea version. This was them. It felt like responding to the heaviness of the new wave of British heavy metal, and just finding their inner fire again. I love the idea that the videos are kind of like filmed in this airport hangar thing, and they say that is something that might have slowed the progress down as well, because this was the absolute, probably the top most magical year or two of MTV, and they're turning in these similar looking, just really stripped down jamming in an airport hangar kind of videos. But I thought they were pretty cool. I thought it was pretty weird that Push to the Front was Rising Power and Nervous Shakedown. Nervous Shakedown was a single, right? But not Rising Power. I always get them mixed up because they're both really slow and atmospheric, but I really like both of them as pretty slow songs. But yeah, my favorites on here, love to death Flick of the Switch, the title track, and Guns for Hire. They're absolutely kick-ass songs, and this is a very heavy album. I was playing it the other day and going through it and realizing that it doesn't let up in any way until you get to Deep in the Hole, and Deep in the Hole opens kind of like slow and minimalist, and then I'm thinking, this is the first time that the energy has been let out of the bag at all on this album. We're halfway through side 2 on this. It's got 2 super fast ones on it in Landslide and Brain Shake, which are weirdly, this doesn't really happen with me often, but they're kind of like my least favorite songs in a certain way. I mean, they're competing with Rising Power and Nervous Shakedown, but Badlands is pretty heavy as well. I love Bedlam in Belgium, that whole story, and I think what you get out of some of these songs is you get what power and enthusiasm and rawness can do to a simple riff, and Bedlam in Belgium is one of those as well. And the other thing I notice here, 2 things, is that everything kind of like goes up a gear on the choruses on this album. It actually gets heavier and more anthemic, and you get even more into it. This is a real drinking album, right? This is the outlaw bad boy acdc album of this era. And I can never understand when people like Fly in the Wall as much or more, or why this kind of got passed over. It's a little bit like Saxon Power and the Glory. It's a head scratcher to me how that gets passed over by people. And it's a head scratcher to me on this one. To me, this is like they're born again. This is their, 1983 bad boy sort of record. And I love it. I love it start to finish, or like it a lot start to finish, put it that way. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Let me just see if there's any other points I wanted to mention here. A funny thing is, I did a whole coffee table book of backstage passes, and I got actually paid in a huge backstage pass collection. And you see out there in the marketplace, it's so easy and so cheap to get Flick of the Switch backstage passes, because what happens out there in the world is when a band prints up however many backstage passes, and that's like laminates in the 300 range, and then satins in like the 3000 range, essentially when there's tons and tons and tons of those left over and they're just put out in the marketplace, or they just get leaked out or whatever, it's a funny sort of commentary on nobody wanted to go see AC/DC. AC/DC was not really the cool band anymore a little bit at this point. So the press weren't interested, and partiers and people, weren't that interested. And essentially what I'm saying is AC/DC were left over with a lot of backstage passes that didn't get distributed because it was just not that big a thing. And the last thing I want to say on that, along that line, is that I always wonder if people were getting maybe a little oversaturated with that hard to love vocal, that hard to love repetition that Reed mentioned in terms of these songs, and just being inundated and slammed over the head with all of those Back in Black songs on radio over and over and over again, and a lot of songs, or a few songs anyways from For Those About to Rock. So it's possible that there was some AC/DC fatigue, because this is third time out, and it is heavier and grittier and more electric, and the production isn't quite there. The drums are a little flat. I mean, I don't mind the production, that it's there to emphasize the guitars, which is what Malcolm wanted to do on it. But yeah, so I love it. I think it's a totally heavy album. I would say Highway to Hell and Power Rage are close to my favorites, but this would start sneaking in right around third for me. And Back in Black would be pretty high as well. And then in this era, I'd go down to Razor's Edge, and then I find a big drop off. So to me, this has always been, since I heard it and since it was so heavy when I heard it at 20 years old versus Back in Black, to me, this has always been my favorite of the Brian era. And I'll give it a 9 out of 10.
And we can find your books at martinpopoff.com. You're on the Contrarians, and you also got History in 5 Songs going.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to throw it over to Tim now from Tim's Final Confessions. Take it away, Tim.
So some of this might be repetition, but I think that Flick of the Switch is the acdc album for people that are sick of acdc. Much like I would say another one, a Dark Horse album I love, Aerosmith Night in the Ruts, is the Aerosmith album for those that are sick of Aerosmith because you haven't heard the songs bludgeoned to death. It is a heavy album for them. It's a really buzzy sounding album. I don't really think the production is that different from Highway to Hell or Back in Black. Maybe it's a little more raw than For Those About to Rock, but that's a good thing in this case. I have to show this off. It's one of my prized possessions, my 8-track version of Flick of the Switch.
I got to show my stuff here too. So there's my CD.
Yeah, not the easiest thing to come across. And
there's the vinyl.
That'd be like, those ones are perfect. Those white album covers are perfect to get signed. And for those that haven't seen them, like Martin talked about the videos they put out, because I think there's the title song, there's Nervous Shakedown, there's at least one more. The visual trip for me is seeing Cliff Williams play that little tiny Steinberger bass, the little like Geddy Lee used to play, and it looks so out of place in AC/DC, but they must have been popular then. I just think it's a really, really good, really consistent AC/DC album. Why any of these songs didn't become radio staples as opposed to songs from Back in Black, it's anyone's guess. Martin's probably spot on with the fact that I wasn't there at the time, or I wasn't listening at the time. It probably was a little bit of that fatigue. It's just a plain white album cover, although I do think it's kind of cool and it's sort of understatedness. Yeah, I think over time, this is an album people can come back to as almost sort of a refresher, is like, if you like AC/DC, why you like them in the first place, because you're not hearing 10 songs that you can turn on any classic rock radio station and hear, and you'd never listen to them of your own accord because you've heard them so many times. I just think there's good song after good song on here. Bedlam in Belgium is funny because it's kind of the same riff as Shot Down in Flames, except they've got that little jangly bit in there too, and that's good. Like, it is one of their good storytelling songs. They do have a few of those. I don't have much more to say about it. I just think it's a really good, consistent AC/DC album, and maybe their last really consistent one from start to finish that don't have at least a couple of songs where you just go, yeah, okay, been there and done that. So I'm going to give this an 8.5. I think this is an album worth revisiting.
Nice. So far, some pretty high ratings. And we can find you at Tim's Vinyl Confessions.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to throw it over to Jamie now. Take us home, Jamie. What do you think about the album?
Well, first of all, I want to tell you how much of an idiot I am. I set up everything here.
You don't have to tell us.
I know, but I'm going to tell you anyways. I'm going to reinforce your belief that I am an idiot. I set everything up here. I had my camera going. I had the lights going. I got AC/DC on the TV. I got my little CDs and albums next to me. And I didn't get the link for the Zoom chat. I'm like, these guys forgot about me. It was yesterday. I did all that yesterday. I'm like, I thought you guys forgot about me. I was a day early. And you know what the first thing I thought of too when I thought you forgot about me? I said, those guys forgot about me. I listened to that dumb record for 4 days for nothing. It's not a total dumb record. Well, it is kind of dumb, but not all bad dumb. Some of it's dumb, I think. Here's the thing with AC/DC. I asked myself, am I, Laszlo, a casual fan? I mean, I'm like missing 2 albums, I think. I've been listening to, if someone made a soundtrack to my life, it would be very long soundtrack, like a 10 CD box set, but AC/DC would be on that soundtrack. But still, am I a casual fan? Because I think I listen to AC/DC a full album front to back once or twice a year. And they got 17 albums? And if you do the math, if I pick one different every time, it's like I'm listening to an album every 8 years, but I'm repeating albums. So then it's longer than that so it's been a long time since I actually sat down and listened to this album. And I got to say, it's okay. Rising Power is a decent opener. And I also did a poll on my Facebook page, Let's Get Physical. You can join, ask to join Let's Get Physical, and I'll let you through. It's all about physical media of any sort. And a lot of people said it's their second favorite Brian Johnson album, Back in Black being number one. Some people said it's repetitive. I kind of agree with both, because second best next to Back in Black, well, I looked at the competition. The casual fan, and I'm kind of casual. I'm business casual, a little bit more casual than casual. You got Flick of the Switch, Fly on the Wall, Blow Up Your Video, Ball Breaker, Stiff Upper Lip, Black Guys, Rocker Bust, Power Up. You got this, which was successful on the on the title track alone, I think carried it. And you got The Razor's Edge, which was like a comeback album with 2 singles. But all these other albums, I mean, the casual concert goer, when they go to see acdc, do they go, hey, if they don't do Heat Seeker, I'm gonna be pissed. They gotta do Heat Seeker. And that was the big hit off this album. No one says that. No one says anything like that of the sort of any of these songs off these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9 albums here. So it makes me wonder, like Martin says, they toured off of Back in Black for like 3 years. What if they never made Back in Black? And they just did For Those About to Rock, and then Flick the Switch, Fly on the Wall, Blow Up Your Video. Without Back in Black, I don't think they're still making albums at this point where I'm talking right now. And if they are, right now there may be a theater band, playing to 3,000, 3,500 people if it wasn't for Back in Black. One album. They're still touring off of Back in Black, Martin, today. A lot of people forget these albums, Ball Breaker. Nobody remembers that unless you are a diehard acdc fan. So here we come to this for diehard acdc fans. Like I said, Rising Power, decent opener. The House is on Fire. Here's the thing. You can go in blind on this album. Never heard it before. See, The House is on Fire. Well, I know how that's going to go. This house is on fire. You would be correct. It's there, right away. The title track is good. I think that's classic acdc. Nervous Shakedown gets a little repetitive. Landslide I like because it's dirty, it's fast paced. It's a little bit different than the rest of the songs. But Guns for Hire and Deep in the Hole, Martin says he loves the choruses because they're like drinking, anthemic. I think these songs lose a little bit of their shimmer on the chorus. They lose their momentum on the chorus. I feel the groove in the verses, right? His verse, chorus, and then they lose me. Bedlam, Belgium. I'm thinking at this point, I think acdc thinks up the melodies on their choruses most times in about 2 minutes. It probably hits them. I think they did it in about 10 seconds on this one. I think they were like, okay, Bedlam and Belgium. Yeah, go with that. And they're very similar. Badlands, I think, is the most repetitive album. And like I said, I have an issue with how repetitive it can be. And Brain Shake, I think it's a really good song until they start saying Brain Shake 40 times in a row. And it is a good drinking album, though, because when you're drinking and with your buddies, you're not paying attention as much. And the repetitive nature of the album doesn't bother you as much. So in that fact, it is kind of a drinking album. So yes, if you're not paying real close attention to it and making notes like me, then yeah, it's a fun album. But if you're paying too close attention, you find the faults. And another thing about a band like acdc, they're a bare bones band. They're a simple band. And the more simple you are, the less you have to hide behind. So you got to have really good songs, because without great songs, you don't have the flash, the production values or the gimmetry, or, in prog, you can make mistakes in prog and it just gets thrown into the mix. Here, it's all up front. So you got to have those songs. I don't think they had the songs on this album, and I think the faults kind of show. What do I give it? Sevens are pretty good albums to me. They're really good albums. I hold on to my 8, 9s, and 10s for really great albums. So I'm going to give this one I hate to say 5.5, but I hate to say 6. I'm always in the middle here. But I'm going to give it a 6. A 5.5 if you're paying attention, a 6 if you're hanging out with your buddies.
Nice.
Awesome. Very cool, Jamie. And we can find you on the Contrarians, Sea of Tranquility. You got your Facebook page. And I know we can find everybody here on the Contrarians and some other shows. People are getting around nowadays, so it's good to see people getting around. Our average score for this album, the Contrarians Dark Horse albums, we give it a 7.7 out of 10.
Nice. Hey, Marco, since there aren't very many of us, can I circle back around to kind of a thought that we've been kicking around as we go through this?
Yeah, go for it.
I want to talk about MTV. So when you look at acdc's catalog in the 80s, of course, Back in Black, and let me just say, I do not understand why Back in Black sold Double Diamond. I mean, it's a great album, but is it one of the best albums ever released in the rock genre? I mean, the sales say yes, but that was pre-MTV. Their next album sold a fraction of that. For those about to rock, we salute you. And then Flick of the Switch sold a fraction of what For Those About to Rock sold. But by Flick of the Switch, they were on MTV. MTV was the biggest radio station on the planet. Radio stations, classic rock at this point was playing songs from the 60s and 70s. And if you were a hard rock band, MTV was just about your only outlet to get your music out there. And acdc are the least photogenic band imaginable. Think about the early videos with Motley Crue and their makeup and the big poofed up hair, or Quiet Riot in the the hockey mask not the hockey mask, the Insanity mask, the guys in the straight jacket. And then you've got acdc, like Martin said, standing in their aircraft hangar, and it's all like black and white. And they say, "Flick of the Switch." I used to turn that video off every time it came on. And it was like, who are these clowns? And I think MTV was like directly responsible for killing that band's momentum. They just did not fit the MTV generation. Anyone want to throw in on this?
That's interesting, because their next studio album, Fly on the Wall, they made those ridiculous videos with the animated fly.
That's what I was going to say.
And it's funny because they made these fun little concept videos in the Bon Scott years, like Jailbreak and Let There Be Rock, It's a Long Way to the Top. It's like they stopped doing that at a certain point, and then they said, "Oh yeah, I guess we're going to have to do this again."
Well, and when you get to Fly on the Wall, they actually did a long form, 1 hour video. I remember watching this thing on MTV, and I was like, this is the most boring thing I have ever sat through. And it doesn't help that Fly on the Wall is not the world's best album to begin with. Although when I was a teenager, I used to laugh my head off every time they played Sink the Pink. I'm sorry. Come on, guys. You know what I'm talking about. Guys all stop emotional development at 13. I thought that song was freaking hilarious. Still don't know what it means, but I thought it was hilarious. But yeah, and then here are these guys shooting pool, and they're in the Australian outback, and it's all dusty. And I'm like, compare that to Tawny Katane crawling over David Coverdale's Jaguar. Which video are you going to watch?
Here's my
Doesn't the bar collapse? Sorry, doesn't the bar collapse at the end of it? Doesn't the whole place just collapse and the band's still playing? Am I remembering that right?
It's been a long time since I've seen it.
Here's my question, though. I say it as a question. In '83 in hard rock, is MTV at a critical mass? I know Kiss got a lot of mileage about unmasking on MTV, but I don't know how many people actually saw it. I know in my corner of the world, MTV was sort of ascending, but it wasn't everywhere in all homes yet.
Okay, so because I lived in a small town, and the way cable TV is distributed, small towns had MTV before big towns did, right? So I don't know what it would have been like if you were in Toronto or Los Angeles or some big market. But in the small market, man, that was how we found out about bands, watching the video for Holy Divers the first time I ever saw Dio.
In my corner of the world, radio was still the driver up until, I'd say, about 85, 86, okay. Somewhere. Then MTV had quite a stranglehold, but I would say that it was the classic rock station in this case are the ones that dropped the ball, at least for AC/DC in my corner of the world and elsewhere.
I was going to say, but were they playing like Hell's Bells and Back in Black on your local radio station?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
and,
okay.
Dirty Deeds and a lot of Let's Get It Up and For Those About to Rock. I mean, you heard it all the time. That's why I thought there might have been just a little bit of oversaturation here by 83, because those songs on 3 albums right in a row played all the time. So
Jamie brought up a good point that I thought was worth revisiting about what would have happened if Back in Black hadn't come out. And I never even thought about that, because if you look at the flowchart of AC/DC's albums, by now they're all of them, until you get to the likes of Rock or Bust, are all platinum. But Back in Black is like, whoop! And so I think if For Those About to Rock had been the follow-up to Highway to Hell, I think you'd have had a certain amount of the, I don't want to say the sympathy, but you'd have the feel-good idea of them replacing their fallen lead singer with this new singer, and it would have definitely generated interest. For Those About to Rock might have done exactly what it ended up doing. And then every album after that probably would have did about what it did. But Jamie's right. Without that milestone album, the album that gave them a career, I don't think they would have that stadium filling capacity for as many years as they did.
Interesting point.
What did glam metal might have done some damage to them, because here came the Pretty Boys, and you had a lot of females buying those albums. What's the ballad? I want to hear the ballad.
Yeah.
Normally track 4 was the ballad. There were no ballads on AC/DC albums, and it was more gruffy, and Brian Johnson's not the glammy looking guy. So I think that maybe did some damage. They seemed old fashioned all of a sudden.
Well, it's true that MTV definitely shined a light on what bands actually look like, which was, and these are bands that I love. You start seeing videos by April Wine and Kansas and 38 Special. Like, these guys are ugly, and they don't know how to present themselves to the camera. And I think with AC/DC, that's why just their live performance clips or their rehearsal hall, live clips with nobody in the audience work so well, because you let Angus dance around on stage and Brian do his thing, and that's AC/DC live. They weren't actors, so you weren't going to see them in the Motley Crue, like Too Young to Fall in Love with the Mad Max type of thing, like the Lick It Up video. But number one, I don't think they would have done it, and they weren't theatrical at all like Ronnie James Dio. So they were in this strange no man's land when Flick of the Switch came out. So I think that hurt the album as much as anything.
Then did you have a problem that pretty soon around this time you start getting AC/DC derivative bands? So their style of music gets watered down. We can go through the list of AC/DC-like bands that started coming out right just after this period.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, like Crocus.
Yeah.
I think I definitely think the MTV conversation is something we can revisit in another topic. I think that's a really interesting conversation. I think that about wraps it up for AC/DC, though. Flick of the Switch, we get a 7.7. Like and subscribe our channel. That helps us grow. So if you like our content, give us a like and subscribe. You can follow us on Patreon and Ko-Fi as well if you want to support us. We also have a TeePublic, and other than that, I want to thank everybody for showing up today, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Absolutely. All right.
Thank you, Marco.
See you later.
All right. Take care.